Hi guys. So I just want to talk to you guys for a second about something that I don't know. I personally was just thinking about, kind of like this week. Okay, so there's this idea of community, right? As in like, okay, so where I live, there are people around me, and like I want to try to be civil so that like the people around me feel some alliance with like me being in the community, but that cannot happen if other people in your community like don't see you as like a human. And so this is a part we have to talk like very specifically about integration and segregation for a moment, because like this is one of the first times in history, specifically in America, where we actually have integrated communities, and we have like so much intersectionality in the upper class right now. And so people are confronting stereotypes and biases that have been pervasive in different religious, cultural, ethnic, racial, national communities for a long time. Like I've talked about anti-blackness in the Asian community. Just because we don't address it, that doesn't take away the like hundreds of thousands of videos where Chinese people were doing blackface and saying nigger because they don't like black people. That was not that long ago. And just because we are censoring the platform today, it doesn't take away that that really happened, right? Or like the article that I posted today about the Afghan Muslim who murdered his wife or something because she cheated in New York. That's a real thing that happened. Okay, or man, just the multiple people who basically said that they do not appreciate Beyonce's like Lemonade halftime performance because it was too pro-black. But the thing about it is like, when are we actually having a conversation about culture? Because so much of like Black American culture is born from oppression. It's literally like after slavery and Jim Crow, people had to find an identity out of being marginalized, and even while dealing with like poverty and police brutality, like they had to build something because they had to find a way to live. Now what I see right now happening, like I saw Ann Coulter posted something on the Unsafe blog about how white teachers are going to be fired first, and it would make sense that she cares about this issue because she's white. But then here's the thing, like there's not like an unlimited number of slots for every single person to get every single thing that they want, and for there to be some sort of like equity. Like that's not a thing. Like some people are not going to be qualified, like some people are not going to be a good like culture fit, as everyone wants to say. So when you actually look at the population, especially in education, the population of students right now and who they are as people, well, if you've got like half the class who like listens to like Nicki Minaj and grew up on like Ty Dolla Signs or something, not even to be funny, but like maybe a white teacher might not be appropriate for that class. And it's kind of strange for me because I've tried to stay in the exact same community that I've grown up in, even while it's changed. And I've kind of tried to be like not so like outward and not so like pushing my culture out into everyone, because black culture does make people uncomfortable. It just does. Like I don't, and especially in my community, it's like demonized and ghettoized in unhealthy and unsafe ways, where it's like every single thing that's black is like degraded, it's poor, it's ugly, it's bad. But every single thing that's conceived as like white is like good, popular, you know, great, acceptable. So like for me, watching that halftime Super Bowl performance with Snoop Dogg, having all of his like gang affiliation symbols on at the halftime show, was like this turning point in terms of like Americana. Like I could have never dreamed that I would live to see that day. Like there's no, like I couldn't have imagined that whoever the people who are in charge would allow that to happen there. Don't get me wrong, because like in terms of like the cultural significance of who like Snoop Dogg is as an artist, I mean, get the fuck up out of here. Like everyone knows who he is. you got grandmas in the closet, you know, who like everybody, especially in terms of like this, like it's like California cool, right? Where it's like I can be on my yacht living in Palo Alto, but when I go home and close the door, I can listen to Snoop Dogg. But if I see anybody who like looks like Snoop Dogg in the community, I'm calling the cops. So it's like active anti-blackness, but it's like cultural appropriation. So it's like the appropriation is acceptable, the actual black bodies are not. And it's something that's very hard to explain until you actually see it. Because like right now we're getting to this point where people are losing jobs, like people are going to jail, people are being held accountable. But this is the first time in history that that's ever happened. And people have been fighting for this for years. And so that's the thing about like this concept, this idea of like winners and losers. Like in order to have actual equity, somebody has to be held accountable. Like somebody's got to get deported, a wall's got to be built, somebody's got to get jail time. So like things have to happen. There has to be like consequences. And for so long in this country, there have been no consequences in terms of any sort of adverse actions that have been taken in relation to like black people. So it's like you could be qualified to go to university at one point in this country, but you were not able to go simply because you were black. That was a thing. That was a thing that happened here. That is the story. You can believe it, you can choose to forget it, you can pretend like it's something else, but it isn't. That's the story. And so especially like right now, when I feel like some people are wondering, they're like, oh, okay, so, but it's because of the murder and stuff. That's why the numbers in terms of like the population of black people are so small, especially in relation to the Latino community. And I want to explain that for a second, because I think there's some parts of it that I understand that maybe you guys don't. So here's the thing, like black women have been getting smarter and more educated. With more money and more education, they have less children, they marry more often, and they marry partners. But you guys have seen other videos where we've talked about the percentage of black males who actually want to be married. It's very low. It's like 16% of like all the black males over like the age of 30 or something. It's a very small percentage. So don't get me wrong, like I think that quite a lot of people are just, you know, being with whoever they want, and so that's kind of like everyone ends up where they want to end up. But in terms of like so there are people who are born, like the 13% of the population who are like, you know, black bodies as women and men or whatever, and they started all different social classes and stuff. But then the women might figure out like, okay, well now I'm like, you know, I've just graduated from college and I'm looking around, I'm kind of like casually dating, but there's no one to date, and I have this great job and I have this great life, like why would I give that up? And I think you're gonna see more of this. This is why you guys see the Octavia Butlers and the like Kelly Stamps. It's like there's nothing wrong with these women. It's just that they don't want to settle for like blue collar broke men. Like why would you do that? It doesn't make any sense, because they don't bring anything to the table. Like you could just go out right now and get a blue collar job, and then you're the same as him. Like what is he bringing to the table? Nothing. Like, and then I watched that video yesterday, and maybe I'll try to like download it and include it here. But okay, so it's a conversation between two black men, right? Now one of them is saying, his argument is like, so he's asking a question. He was genuinely curious. He's like, does your wife cook for you when you get home? And the other guy says, no, but I do some cooking sometimes, you know. And he's like, I don't understand. Why is your wife not cooking for you? And he was like, she's tired. And then the other guy's like, why is she tired? And then the guy's like, because she works all day. And then he was just so confused. He's like, what? And then the guy's like, no, like she's tired because she worked all day. And he really couldn't understand. Like in his mind, he has no, like the concept of partnership was so foreign. Like he really didn't get it. It didn't make any sense. That is the issue, okay? Like we are not in a time of like Dick Van Dyke, okay, where women were expected to be homemakers and they were not expected to work, and for a family to be in the middle class. That's not a thing. Today, if you want to be a part of the middle class, you need two working people. if you have blue collar jobs, you need 2 people. If there's one person who's making over $200,000 a year, then you only need one person. And the other person, whether that be the mom or the dad, can choose to stay home. There is a dog kid, he wants to join the video, and it's very funny. So I think a part of this, like, some people are trying to live as if they were the upper middle class, and they're not. And the weird part about it is, like, they don't understand the language, they don't understand the culture, they don't understand the movies, the TV shows that have actually unpacked what it's like to be upper middle class in America, even especially in terms of, like, political correctness. And I've talked about Bobo's in Paradise multiple times here, but the new elites are not the whitewashed preppies from Princeton anymore. It's more like the immigrant with 2 Berkeley master's degrees who's a lesbian and has a wife and 3 children. It's like, these families do not look like they did in the past. And so the questions about intersectionality, culture, society, race are more important now than they were before, unless you want to live in some hick town in Wisconsin, or if you want to live in a mountain or something in Ohio, where in those particular parts of America, there are no people of color, and I don't think any people of color will ever come there. But also, those people who live there will never come here. As in, like, all of their music, all of their TV shows, like Portlandia and whatever the other I'm not saying these shows are bullshit, because, like, I have lived in communities too where people watch those shows and they like them and they're interesting. I'm just saying, in terms of, like, the population of people here now, especially if you're trying to understand, like, me, I don't know anybody who would watch that. It's out of touch. Like, no one gives a shit, and it doesn't make sense. It's not interesting. And it's not telling the story of the city. The city is where the life is now, and it will continue to be like that. Like, if you would like to live in the city, well, we are the city people. We care about fashion, we care about politics, we care about food, and we care about wine. Well, I don't know about everyone, but I know I care about those things. And also, I want to say this, like, my ideology changes with the more interactions I have and the more people I meet. Okay, like, I'm cultured in terms of, like, the way that I grew up, but I also see the way that culture is impacting, like, bias, and it's causing me to not want to hold on to that culture and believe that that culture is all there is. I personally want to live in a society that is improving. I want to live in a society that's moving into the future. I don't want to live in a society stuck in yesterday or one that's from the 90s. Like, I don't want that. And so this is why, for me, a society like Germany, to me, is better. Like, they've made policy changes and infrastructure investments that are allowing people to live full, whole lives. And I want to live a full, whole life. I don't want to be plagued by systemic racism. I'm sorry. I'm just not putting that story out into society for other Habesha girls to see and feel like they have to live this life of non-expression and unfeeling and political correctness and, like, whatever other bullshit that I feel like I saw on television growing up my entire life. I don't like that. It's not cool to me, and I don't want to watch it. I'm just going to keep pretending like this is another thing I told you guys. Like, I didn't want to make any content because I wanted people to really be like, oh, Olivia has no story. Oh, she doesn't have anything. Oh, she blah, blah, whatever the story was, whatever bullshit story you said. That's why I created the Finstagram accounts. Some people who I invited in have been watching us thrive. We've been thriving. This isn't new. We just did it around you. Like, we did it in Brazil, okay? We did it in New York. We did it in LA, and we will do it in Germany again. And 5 years later, you will finally find the Finstagram account, and maybe you'll hear the story. But here's the thing that's so strange. Like, a lot of you guys are out here in these same little whack-ass groups with the same, like, ugly women who, like, they really just be telling y'all these bullshit stories. Oh, I'm this, I'm that, I did this, I feel this way, whatever bitches say. Like, they say a lot of shit, blah, 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 whap, 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 whap. And the reality is, whoever that girl is in your community, that person will probably continue to be that girl. That's just how life works. And there's nothing you can do. There's no lie you can tell. There's no story you can create that's going to, like, take something away from her. She's going to figure out a way to thrive, and you should stop being a hater if that's you, or if it's not you, then good. Be a supporter. And also just realize that, like, you have your own narrative and you can thrive within your narrative without putting anyone else down. Like, putting someone else down, as we know, it doesn't actually lift you up like people for some reason think it does. I don't know who created that weird narrative of like, oh, I feel better now that I've like talked about someone else's flaws. It's like, no matter how much you talk about someone else's flaws, it didn't make you less flawless. Like, you still have your flaws. So instead of talking about someone else's, why don't you just invest the time into fixing your own flaws? Because you definitely have some, like I have some. That's why those of you who have been here, you've been watching me on my lifelong progression trip of me like fixing my problems and my flaws. I don't want to do it in an exploitative way though. Like, I'm not doing it while stepping on someone else. Don't get me wrong, because I do like to be critical of other people, and especially when it comes to like art, culture, and fashion, those are things that I do care about. So like, if I don't like your outfit, I don't like your outfit, and you know, that doesn't mean I don't like you. There are pretty women who have bad outfits, and there are ugly women who have good outfits. So it goes both ways, right? Things are contextual. You got to kind of give each situation is definitely specific. What else? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I really feel like the intersectionality and what did I say earlier? It's like cultural awareness is like so important right now. Like, those are the conversations of today that we've just been having them way too slowly, especially if we're talking about Black people, because a lot of you guys just assume that Africa is like a country when it's a continent. That means it has like hella countries, and not just hella countries, specifically 54. And all of those countries, like, think of America as one country. That's like Nigeria, one country, okay? There's 54 of them, so it's very large. There's a lot of people there. So there's so many like Black stories. You can't just look at like, my story is vastly different from Kelly Stamps, and we're both like technically in terms of nationality American. But I'm Habesha and she is not, though technically we're kind of similar in skin complexion. Kelly Stamps is a millionaire. I am not. We are different in terms of finance, okay? Like, she likes different music than I like. Like, even though we both like K-pop, I like Blackpink. I don't think she does. She likes that other group. It's different. Like, just because we have the same skin complexion does not mean that we're even similar. We literally are living different lives and don't have similarities. Like, you'd have to go watch an individual. You'd have to read that individual's blog post. You'd have to see the pictures of their closet to know their fashion style, to know what music that they like, to understand who they are. Like, you have to talk to them. You can't just assume based on what someone else said. Here's another interpretation that I actually appreciate that I heard from Kenya. So some woman wrote a book. She was like, I'm really happy my mother died. And a lot of people were like, oh my God, no, you shouldn't want your parents to die. But she talks about how her mom just actually introduced all this trauma in her life, and so she didn't have a positive parenting experience. I relate to that so heavily. Like, I also did not have a positive parenting experience. Not everyone does, and that's real too. So people were being critical about her because she mentioned other people in her story, like Ariana Grande, I think Miley Cyrus, some other famous people, and she was just giving her interpretation of her interactions with those people. That's something that has to be very clear. Like, in her book, she can literally sit here and describe, like, I went through this with this person and here's how I felt about it. That's what she did. And then, you know, Ariana Grande could now put out her book where she talks about her own experience about it. And both of those things are true. Like, Ariana Grande has her perspective about what happened, and then this girl who wrote the book has her perspective. Because two people can be in the same place at the same time and have two completely different lived experiences. And for some reason, everybody just thinks that there's only one story. Like, oh, like, whatever way somebody tells a story, that's true. And it's not. It's just not true. Like, you are not, like, living someone else's life. Like, you can only live your perspective. That's it. Like, so if I'm doing something over here, what I have is like all the people that I knew before, the way my parents raised me, the things that I have going on in my personal life that you don't know about. But you could just watch something that I do and be like, oh, I assume that she did this because blah, 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 blah. And that's fine. Like, that's now a story that you could go explain, like, I saw Olivia do this. And you could be like, and then that's what happened. That doesn't really make it true. It doesn't make it like a full story. It's just like your interpretation of what you experienced. It is your lived experience. It's just not like the whole truth. That's what's even hard about explaining this idea of like whole truth too, because like everything's contextual. Putting a story together and talking about it in terms of like other people. This is another reason why I've really been trying to, on this channel, have like individual experiences. Like sometimes I will be with someone else, but I'm telling you a story from my perspective. Like I'm including photos that I took, and I'm really trying to like show you guys how I spend days in my life in solitude, so that you can see how to experience things on your own for yourself. Because if you are out of high school, you really do have the ability to like go out and provide for yourself without the help or support of other people. It is nice if you do have the help and support of other people, but it is also acceptable if you don't. And if you need the help and support of other people, I would encourage you to start with a therapist and not a family member, because as I've explained today on my Instagram, there are times when parents and family members can be toxic and completely unhelpful. So yeah.